What drives a man to challenge a god? How does a warrior, once trusted by the emperor, become the most feared and reviled figure in the galaxy? Can a single decision really change the fate of an entire galaxy? How does a champion, who once fought for honor and duty, fall into the abyss of betrayal and power, embracing darkness that would forever stain his soul? What if the most feared figure in the galaxy wasn't born evil, but was shaped by betrayal and ambition? Abaddon the Despoiler is a tragic and enigmatic figure whose story continues to haunt the universe. His journey from loyal servant of the Emperor to the harbinger of chaos is not just the story of a villain, but the tragic tale of a man consumed by forces greater than himself. Abaddon was once a space marine captain of the Luna Wolves Legion, fighting for the Emperor in the Great Crusade to bring unity to the stars. He fought beside his brothers with unwavering loyalty, a man who believed in the Emperor's vision of peace and order. To those who knew him, he was a paragon of honor and strength. But all of that began to change when the Horus heresy shattered everything he believed in. The Horus heresy wasn't just a conflict. It was the moment when the very soul of humanity was tested. The galaxy burned as the Emperor's most trusted son, Horus, turned against him, and with him, many of the Emperor's most formidable warriors. Abaddon was swept up in this cataclysm, but his fall was more than just an act of rebellion. It was the culmination of his own internal struggle. He was faced with a choice: continue to fight for a broken imperium, or abandon it and embrace the power of chaos. But what caused Abaddon to betray everything he had once stood for? The answer lies not in the allure of power, but in the promise of something deeper. The Chaos Gods didn't just offer him strength, they offered freedom. Freedom from the chains of duty, freedom from the endless war, freedom from the weight of a broken world. This was the temptation that Abaddon could not resist. But in his search for something greater, something that could give him the strength to change the galaxy, he began to lose himself. The temptation was seductive. Abaddon was no longer fighting for the Emperor's vision. He was fighting for his own future, a future where he could shape the galaxy in his own image. The Emperor's failure to protect mankind had left him disillusioned, and Abaddon began to question his faith. Was the Emperor truly the savior of humanity, or was he just another flawed ruler, no different from the tyrants he had sought to overthrow? Was the Imperium, which had once promised peace, merely a system built on lies and corruption? These questions gnawed at Abaddon, pushing him toward the Chaos Gods, whose promises seemed far more appealing than the Emperor's cold, unyielding rule. As Abaddon embraced chaos, he didn't just betray the Emperor. He betrayed his brothers in arms who had once fought alongside him. This wasn't just an external conflict. It was a battle within himself. Could the warrior who had once lived by honor truly embrace the Chaos Gods, or had he already lost his soul in the process? The internal conflict was consuming him, and the farther he went, the harder it became to find his way back. The dark path he chose was one that could not be reversed, and as he walked further into the abyss, he realized there was no going back. This moment of betrayal was not a sudden act. It was the result of years of inner turmoil, frustration, and desperation. Abaddon sacrificed everything for the promise of power, and in doing so, he lost his identity, his honor, and his place in the galaxy. The moment he turned to chaos, he ceased to be the man he once was. He was no longer a warrior. He was a servant of darkness, an agent of destruction. But was Abaddon in control of his fate? Or was he merely a pawn in a game far beyond his understanding? The forces of chaos are not ones that can be tamed. They consume, they twist, and they shape their champions into instruments of destruction. Abaddon may have believed he was in control, but in truth, he was just as much a victim of the chaos gods as any other warrior who had fallen before him. The gods promised power, but they also demanded loyalty. And once Abaddon had given himself to them, there was no escaping their grasp. Abaddon's transformation into the Despoiler wasn't just about power. It was about the consequences of losing one's soul. The betrayal of the Emperor, his brothers, and even his own humanity was a price that Abaddon would pay for the rest of his existence. The price of embracing chaos was steep, and Abaddon would carry that burden for eternity. But what is the cost of such ambition? Is it worth the destruction of everything you once held dear? As we delve into Abaddon's story, we must confront these questions. Can a man, once so noble, truly redeem himself? Or has the darkness consumed him entirely? And ultimately, is Abaddon the villain of the story? Or is he simply a product of the galaxy's cruelty? Abaddon's tale is not just one of corruption, but one of loss, of a man who sought to change the galaxy but ended up losing himself in the process. His legacy, for better or worse, will shape the future of the Warhammer 40,000 universe. And perhaps his story is a warning to all who seek power. Without understanding the cost, what drives a once loyal servant to defy the Emperor himself? Was it a single decision that shattered the Imperium? Or was Abaddon simply a pawn in a galaxy gone mad? Abaddon the Despoiler's rise wasn't just a fall from grace. It was the destruction of everything he had ever known, driven by doubt, desire, and a tragic need to break free. Abaddon, once known as Ezekiel Abaddon, was a paragon of the Emperor's vision. He was the captain of the Luna Wolves, a warrior of exceptional skill and unwavering loyalty. His entire life had been defined by service to the Emperor, the one man he believed could unite the galaxy under a banner of peace. Alongside his brothers, Abaddon fought for a vision of humanity's future, a future where mankind could thrive among the stars. He was respected, feared, and trusted, a true hero of the Imperium. But as with all great tragedies, the seeds of Abaddon's betrayal were sown long before the heresy began. For years, Abaddon had stood by the Emperor, but the cracks in his faith had begun to show. The Emperor's grand vision began to feel less like a guiding light and more like a prison. What was freedom if all he ever did was follow orders, without room for growth? These questions festered in his mind. As Abaddon fought battle after battle, conquering world after world, the weight of the Imperium's endless wars began to suffocate him. He was no longer fighting for a future of unity. He was fighting to maintain a status quo that seemed increasingly irrelevant to him. Abaddon, surrounded by his brothers in arms, began to feel more and more isolated. They fought for the same cause, but Abaddon's heart stirred with a desire no one else could understand. He felt the weight of the Imperium's expectations, his brothers, his leader, all calling for unity. Yet in his heart, something else stirred, a desire for freedom that none could understand. As the galaxy's most trusted warrior, Abaddon's doubt remained his alone to bear, and the burden of disillusionment slowly crushed him from within. It was in these moments of doubt that Horus, the War Master, reached out to Abaddon with a vision that would forever change his life. Horus, once the Emperor's most beloved son, had turned against his father. He saw the Emperor not as a savior, but as a tyrant. He promised Abaddon a new future, a galaxy where power wasn't held by one man, but by the strongest. It wasn't just the allure of power that drew Abaddon to Horus. It was the promise of freedom from the endless wars and the rigid control of the Emperor's rule. For the first time, Abaddon saw the chance to be more than a soldier, to be his own master in a galaxy where freedom was a distant dream. Horus' words weren't merely a call to arms. They were a seductive invitation to Abaddon's deepest desires. Chaos was not just a promise of power. It was an escape from the chains of duty, an opportunity to forge a new path in a universe that had become a prison to him. The decision to betray the Emperor wasn't made lightly, but in the depths of his isolation, Abaddon saw in Horus' vision a chance to redefine his fate. But the betrayal wasn't instantaneous. Abaddon's heart wavered. He had served the Emperor for centuries, fought side by side with his brothers, and yet in this moment of choice, the Emperor's vision no longer held meaning. As Horus extended his hand, Abaddon's soul cried out for something more, something that could fill the void of endless war and despair. As Horus reached out, offering a chance to rewrite the galaxy, Abaddon's heart wavered. He had served the Emperor for centuries, yet in this moment of betrayal, he realized the Emperor's vision no longer held meaning. His soul cried out for something more. He wasn't just joining chaos. He was leaving behind the last vestiges of his humanity. The emotional devastation of this decision tore Abaddon apart. This was not just a battle of armies, but a battle for his very soul. The moment he cast his lot with chaos, Abaddon felt his very soul tremble. The weight of his past, of everything he had once stood for, crushed him. Was he still Abaddon, the captain of the Luna Wolves, or had he already become something else entirely? The man who had once been a noble warrior was now a servant of destruction, a leader of chaos. The transformation into the Despoiler was not merely a physical one. It was an emotional and spiritual collapse. Abaddon had sacrificed everything, his honor, his loyalty, and his humanity, in the name of something greater. But the price was steep. Chaos demanded not just his allegiance, but his very identity. Abaddon, once a man of purpose and vision, became a hollow shell, consumed by the very force he had embraced. He was no longer a champion of the Emperor. He was the embodiment of everything he had once fought against. The first step on the road to the Black Crusades was marked by regret. The further Abaddon delved into the forces of chaos, the more he felt the weight of his past bearing down on him. But the lure of power and freedom was too strong to resist. His transformation into Abaddon the Despoiler was not a momentary lapse. It was a gradual process, a descent into darkness that would forever mark him. His betrayal was not just a strategic decision. It was a sacrifice of everything he once believed in. The man who had once been a hero was now a villain, a servant of the gods of chaos, forever bound to their will. But even as Abaddon led the Black Legion in the Black Crusades, a part of him still questioned the price of his ambition. Each victory, each conquest seemed hollow. As the Despoiler, Abaddon became more than a general. He became the embodiment of loss, a man whose every victory felt like a funeral for the soul he had abandoned. The Black Crusades were not just battles, they were his personal struggle, an attempt to reconcile the man he once was with the monster he had become. What happens when a warrior, once loyal to the Emperor, seeks to command the very gods of chaos? Can a man ever master the gods of chaos? Or does every attempt to control them only lead to madness? For Abaddon, the road to power was paved with both glory and ruin. In his quest to become the most powerful figure in the galaxy, he sought the favor of the Chaos gods. But in doing so, he entered a domain where control was nothing but an illusion. Abaddon's decision to align with chaos was not one made lightly. He did not simply kneel before the Chaos gods. He thought he could control them. Believing that he, Abaddon, could wield their immense power without losing himself. But he didn't understand the true cost of such ambition. The Chaos gods do not grant power without demanding everything in return. Each of the Chaos gods, Khorne, Tzeen, Nurgle, and Slaanesh, represented something different, something deeply personal to Abaddon. Khorne's thirst for blood spoke to Abaddon's rage. He had always fought with fury, but now it was sanctioned. Tzeen promised the secrets of the universe, a tantalizing offer for a man who sought to control the galaxy. Nurgle's resilience was an antidote to the suffering of endless war, while Slaanesh whispered the joys of indulgence, offering Abaddon the release he had long been denied. Each of these gods offered him something he had been craving, the chance to break free from the rigid, unyielding grip of the Emperor's vision. At first, the promises of power seemed irresistible. Abaddon, the warrior who had once fought for a cause greater than himself, now saw in chaos an opportunity to forge a new future, one where he could be free from the endless wars and blind loyalty. The Chaos gods didn't offer just power, they offered the chance to shape the universe on his own terms. No more endless wars, no more blind loyalty. This was freedom, real freedom, from the rigid, unyielding grip of the Emperor's vision. But as the gods whispered their promises in his ear, Abaddon began to realize that the price of their power was far greater than he could have ever imagined. The more he sought to bend them to his will, the more he found himself being pulled into their orbit. He had thought that he could control them, but in truth, it was the gods who were controlling him. Abaddon had become a puppet in their game, and with each string they pulled, he lost a little more of himself. At times, Abaddon wondered if he was still the man who once fought for the Emperor. He heard his old self calling out to him, but the voices of the gods were louder, and the more he listened, the further he drifted from who he once was. The more he embraced the gods' gifts, the more his humanity slipped away. His rage, his pride, and his desires were amplified by the gods, but with every new power came the erosion of his identity. He was no longer Abaddon the captain of the Luna Wolves. He was Abaddon the Despoiler, a servant of the gods, forever bound to their will. The internal struggle that Abaddon faced was not just one of power, it was a battle for his very soul. Abaddon's journey was no longer just about ambition, it was about survival. Each god pulled him in a different direction, and with every new power he lost more of himself. The gods promised him strength, but with every gift came a curse. The more Abaddon embraced them, the less he recognized the man he once was. But the allure of chaos was not easy to resist. The gods had given him power beyond his wildest dreams, and yet with it, they had taken everything that made him human. Abaddon, once a man of vision, had become a hollow shell, consumed by the will of the gods. He had sought to use chaos for his own purposes, but in the end, he was nothing more than a vessel for their desires. As Abaddon led the forces of chaos in the Black Crusades, he realized that the price of power had been his very soul. The more Abaddon embraced the gods, the less he recognized himself. At times, he glimpsed his old self, faint memories of loyalty, of honor, but they were fading, slipping through his fingers like sand. He had sacrificed everything he once held dear, the loyalty, the honor, the ideals he had once fought for. The man who had once believed in a future of unity had become the harbinger of destruction. The gods had promised him freedom, but instead, they had imprisoned him in a cycle of destruction, where every victory only served to further his fall. Khorne demanded blood, Tzeentch demanded change, Nurgle demanded resilience, and Slaanesh demanded indulgence. Abaddon had become their perfect champion, a being whose every action was dictated by their whims. The gods had given him power, but at the cost of everything he had once been. Abaddon's fate was sealed the moment he embraced chaos. He had traded his humanity for power, his identity for destruction. But the question remained, was he a pawn in a game played by the gods, or was he truly the master of his own destiny? Can a man ever master the gods of chaos, or does every attempt to control them only lead to madness? As the Black Crusades raged on, Abaddon found himself locked in a battle, not just against the Imperium, but against the very forces he had allied himself with. The gods had given him power, but they had also taken everything from him. Could he ever escape their grasp, or had he already become a mere puppet of their will? Abaddon's struggle was far from over, and as the galaxy trembled under the weight of his ambition, one thing was clear. Abaddon, the Despoiler, would never be free. Abaddon, the Despoiler's name isn't just feared, it is cursed. A man once destined for greatness, now reduced to a monster in the eyes of the galaxy. His fall from grace wasn't just the destruction of his body, but the destruction of his very soul. Abaddon's legacy isn't one of victory or glory. It is one of loss, of a man who sought to reshape the galaxy, but ended up losing everything he once held dear. As the leader of the Black Legion, Abaddon became the embodiment of chaos, a figure whose every action was shaped by the very forces he had once believed he could control. The Black Crusades, a series of brutal campaigns against the Imperium, were his primary means of achieving his vision. But with every victory, Abaddon fought not just for power, but for something far more elusive, a chance to escape the ghosts of his past. With each victory, Abaddon fought not just for power, but for something far more elusive, a chance to escape the ghosts of his past. But the more he conquered, the more he lost. Each conquest, each city reduced to ash, took a piece of the man he once was. Abaddon's triumphs no longer brought him joy. Instead, they served as a reminder of what he had sacrificed. Each victory in the Black Crusades felt more like a funeral, a victory over the Imperium, but a deeper loss of the man he had once been. He had sought to build a new future, but in the end, every victory only deepened the emptiness inside him. The more he achieved, the more hollow his existence became. But what drove Abaddon beyond the point of no return? Was he searching for redemption, or had his soul already been claimed by the Chaos gods before he even began? Abaddon's legacy is not just one of destruction. It is a cautionary tale, a story of ambition, betrayal, and the cost of seeking power without understanding the price. The gods of chaos had promised him freedom and power, but they had also given him madness and destruction. Abaddon had become a living symbol of the galaxy's darkest desires, a man who sought to create a new world but was lost in the ruins of his own soul. Abaddon's actions didn't just ripple across the Imperium. They left scars that would never heal. The Black Crusades became a symbol of the Imperium's vulnerability, a constant reminder that the forces of chaos were always lurking, waiting for their chance to strike. The very concept of endless war, a war that could never be won, was a reflection of the eternal struggle Abaddon had set in motion. The Imperium was locked in a cycle of survival, its future uncertain, forever threatened by the ambition of one man. As the leader of the Black Legion, Abaddon had become something more than just a general. Abaddon had become more than just a general. He became a living symbol of the galaxy's darkest desires, a man who sought to build a new world but was lost in the ruins of his own soul. He was a reflection of everything the galaxy had become, broken, corrupted, and doomed to fight for an eternity without purpose. Every victory in the name of chaos was not just a victory for the gods. It was a reminder of everything Abaddon had lost. The Chaos gods, for all their promises, had twisted him into a creature unrecognizable even to himself. They had offered him power, but in exchange, they had taken his humanity. The more Abaddon embraced chaos, the further he slipped from his humanity. Each battle won, each city reduced to ash, took a piece of the man he once was. The Chaos gods didn't just give him strength. They gave him the illusion of control. They fed his ego until he believed he could command their power without consequence. But with every command, they pulled him deeper into their madness, until he became no more than a puppet, dancing to their whims. Abaddon's internal struggle never ceased. The question of whether he could ever redeem himself, or if he was forever lost, haunted him. Was Abaddon truly lost, or was the man who fought beside the Emperor long gone, swallowed up by a hunger for power that no amount of redemption could ever quench? The irony of Abaddon's journey was that, in his quest for redemption, he had only doomed himself further. He had traded his soul for power, and now he was trapped in a cycle of destruction he could not escape. His legacy is one of tragedy. Abaddon's fate is sealed, but his struggle is far from over. Has he become the master of his destiny, or is he forever doomed to serve the gods he once sought to control? The question lingers, unanswered. as Abaddon's journey continues to unfold. He sought power, but he found only emptiness. He sought redemption, but all he found was further loss. His story is not one of glory or victory. It is a warning to all who seek power without understanding the cost. In the end, Abaddon's legacy is one of endless struggle, an eternal war waged not just against the Imperium, but against the very forces that had corrupted him. Abaddon's legacy is a cautionary tale, a story of ambition, betrayal, and the cost of seeking power without understanding the price. He is a symbol of what happens when a man, in his search for meaning, loses everything he holds dear. The galaxy will remember him not as a hero, but as a tragic figure whose ambition consumed him, leaving only destruction in its wake. Abaddon the Despoiler's name is a curse that echoes across the galaxy, a tale of ambition, betrayal, and a man's soul lost to darkness. His rise to power was marked by victories, but each conquest only deepened the void inside him. Abaddon's fate is sealed, but his struggle is far from over. Has he become the master of his destiny, or is he forever doomed to serve the gods he once sought to control? In the end, Abaddon's quest for power became his eternal prison. The legacy he leaves behind is one of loss, not just for the worlds he destroyed, but for the man he once was. He fought not only for control of the galaxy, but for something far more elusive, a chance to escape the ghosts of his past. But with every victory, every city reduced to ash, he lost more of himself. With each victory, Abaddon fought not just for power, but for something far more elusive, a chance to escape the ghosts of his past. But the more he conquered, the more he lost. The Black Crusades, once a symbol of hope for Abaddon, became his personal nightmare. Each triumph over the Imperium was hollow. Each victory in the Black Crusades felt more like a funeral. A victory over the Imperium, but a deeper loss of the man he had once been. His ambition, once pure, had become a curse. The more he sought to reshape the galaxy, the more he descended into madness, his soul slipping further away with every battle. Abaddon's internal struggle never ceased, even as he led the Black Legion to countless victories. Every battle he won only reminded him of the price he had paid. Every victory Abaddon claimed on the battlefield only deepened the void inside him. His internal war was far more brutal than the battles he fought. Each conquest, another reminder of what he had lost. His victories no longer brought him joy, only the hollow echo of a soul that was fading with every battle. Abaddon had become the very thing he once despised, the embodiment of destruction, a slave to the Chaos Gods. The Chaos Gods had promised him power, freedom, and the chance to control his destiny. But in reality, they had consumed him. The Chaos Gods didn't just offer Abaddon power. They promised him the freedom to shape the galaxy as he saw fit. But the more he took, the more they claimed him. His ambition became their weapon, his soul their prize. The gods didn't just manipulate him. They seduced him with the illusion of control, feeding his ego until he believed he could command them without consequence. But with every command, they pulled him deeper into their madness, until he was no longer Abaddon the man, but Abaddon the Despoiler, a puppet dancing to their whims. Abaddon had thought he could use chaos, but in the end, it was chaos that had used him. At first, chaos seemed like a path to true freedom. The Emperor's rule had always felt like a prison, a chain around his soul. The gods promised liberation, but what Abaddon didn't realize was that the price was his very essence. What began as a search for freedom and power had ended in a descent into madness and despair. The tragic irony of Abaddon's fate lies in his search for redemption. No matter how many victories he claimed, Abaddon could never escape the truth that he had become the very thing he once fought against. His quest for redemption, a futile search for a soul long lost, became his eternal prison. Even as the Black Crusades raged on, Abaddon could not escape the emptiness inside him. He had traded his soul for power, and now he was trapped in an eternal war, unable to break free from the forces that controlled him. Abaddon's legacy will not be one of glory or triumph. Abaddon's legacy isn't just one of conquest, it's a warning. He sought to control his destiny, to reshape the galaxy, only to become a slave to the very forces he thought he could command. His name will be remembered as a symbol of ambition, betrayal, and the cost of seeking power without understanding the price. He will be a cautionary tale, a reminder of the eternal struggle between ambition and the soul's destruction. As the galaxy trembles under the weight of his ambitions, one question remains. Will Abaddon ever be free from the grip of the Chaos gods, or has he become a permanent servant to their will? Abaddon's fate is sealed, but his struggle is far from over. He may lead the forces of chaos, but in the end, is he their champion or their captive? Has he become the master of his destiny, or is he just another pawn in their game? Abaddon's name will live on as a symbol of ambition, betrayal, and the cost of power. Abaddon's legacy is a cautionary tale, a story of ambition, betrayal, and the cost of seeking power without understanding the price. As the Black Crusades rage on, one question remains. Will the man who sought to change the galaxy ever escape the chaos he created? Or is he doomed to be its eternal servant?